Hello to everyone, wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. For the past 2.5 years, as Kathy said, we have been working on Article 2. We have lived and breathed Article 2 almost 24 hours a day, it seems. And I have to say, I am so thrilled to have worked with this group of people. And you'll excuse me, I get a little emotional. The dedication, the love for this faith, and that was at the core of each and every person. We love this faith. Our young adults came in as youth. Some folk have been here for almost ever. Some people have been here for just a hot minute. But what is clear is that we love this faith. So once again, I personally want to thank the committee, Rob Spirko, Satya Mamdani, Paula Cole-Jones, Maya Waller, Becky Brooks, who just really got us through so much of what she gave us is reflected in this work. And yet we could not have done it without the support of the board, Meg Riley and Kathy Burek, who has been with us from day one. Greg Boyd was with us, and of course, Marcus Fagliano. And I also want to give a special shout out to Carrie McDonald for the support that we got from the staff. We had regular meetings with Carrie, and Carrie was so supportive of this process. So thank you all. Today, we have given our report to the board. Many of you may have seen it, some of you have not. We are going to go through on a high level the sections of that report and again present to you the revised version of Article 2. And we'll begin with the charge.
Hello, everyone. As Kathy mentioned a little bit of the charge, I'm just going to read a few pieces that really encapsulate what we did as a commission. So we were charged as a commission to root our work in love as a principal guide in our work, attending particularly to the ways that we and our root traditions have understood and articulated love and how we have acted out of love. And then as a commission, we were charged with reviewing all sections of Article 2, and we were free to revise, replace, or restructure them as needed to meet the objectives stated in the rest of the charge. There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, nor their specific wordings, nor in the way that Article 2 is laid out. And we were encouraged to be creative, and we brought both this grounding of love and this creativity into our work and what we are going to be presenting today. And now we'll go into our process and timeline with Satya.
So I'm going to talk about our process and our upcoming timeline a little bit. We convened as a commission in fall of 2020. We spent the first little bit of our time together really building a shared understanding of the scope of the charge that we were given by the board, and also that history of Article 2 that was discussed earlier, really understanding that and understanding what our process would look like. And we moved on to designing a very comprehensive feedback process, which included creating congregational discussion resources, which could be used for small group ministry or group discussions. We engaged with multiple affiliate organizations. We held General Assembly sessions. We also created informational videos that reached 7,765 viewers. We created 29 surveys that generated a total of 10,925 responses. We also held 45 feedback sessions that had a total of 4,611 participants. So we had a very comprehensive feedback process that resulted in us receiving feedback from thousands of people. Moving on to our timeline. So right now, the finished Article 2 study report is included in the January 2023 board packet. It's also available at uua.org/A2SC-report. Over the next couple of months, Article 2 forums will be held so people can learn, talk, process our proposal. There will also be opportunities for delegates to recommend amendments to the proposal at a mini assembly at GA. Additionally, we have 2 votes coming up. So our first vote takes place at GA 2023. The second vote would take place at GA 2024, and they're both a little bit different. The GA 2023 vote is a majority vote to move our proposal to a vote at GA 2024. And then our vote at GA 2024 is an adoption vote, which would require 2/3 majority vote to adopt the new Article 2. And that's a summary of our process in the upcoming timeline.
Hi, I'm Paula Cole-Jones, a member of All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. So with our approach, of course, the first thing we had to do was really to gel as a team and to get to know each other so that we could really go deep and we could challenge ourselves, press our boundaries, come together and find consensus in our work. So that was a major piece of it. And as we did some of that, we explored a lot in addition to really understanding our charge and the scope of our work. We also spent a lot of time just kind of in inquiry. What are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, be asking of each other? What questions might people have of us? And then those questions were reviewed and decided that they fit into these 4 categories. And then we went out and tested them. We all had people that we interviewed with our first set of questions to get feedback to see if those questions worked for people, if they were yielding the results. Then we came back and tweeted it again and made changes. So I just want you to have that sense of what it was like for us to get ready. And we put a lot of focus on values early on in the process, and many of you were involved in those conversations. So the 4 categories that we really focused or grouped our work in were mission, our values, our covenant as a covenantal spiritual community or religious community, and our inspirations. And you hear that language now throughout the revised Article 2.
Thanks, Paula. I'm Dr. Rob Spurko, coming to you from Maryville, Tennessee, where I'm a member at Foothills UU Fellowship. We're just right next to Knoxville. I want to talk a little bit about what we learned when we started really looking at the way Article 2 works for Unitarian Universalism. That we sort of broke it down and it fulfilled a couple of functions that are traditional to any bylaws kind of opening section, right? That it gives the sort of legal and organizational structure, right? You know, who the UUA is, and you know, what are some of the parameters of its organization. And the interesting thing for us was that we expect a lot of things out of our bylaws that a lot of people do not expect out of bylaws, right? not many churches have theological expectations actually from their bylaws, for instance, or organizations of any kind. There were theological elements. People expected to articulate a theology. There's social elements, right? Things like the 7 principles were cultural touchstones for UUs, right? It was educational, like religious educators talked about the list of sources being useful in that front, and RE often depends on having the values or the principles kind of front and center. People took it as personal codes of ethics, right? I mean, this thing that was the organizational document for our national organization spoke to people in a personal way. These principles, give people, principles to live by, in other words. It was used evangelically, right? How do you explain what a UU is? People would use the article to, the elements of that. And then it was used rhetorically, right? When ministers would have to speak publicly at rallies or events, right? Or things like that, right? So all of these things fall into Article 2, right? In the way it was used, right? But, I'll be honest, it wasn't really engineered with those things in mind, I don't think. And so we were trying to make sure it did what it was supposed to do, but keeping an eye on the fact that there are these other expectations that, because we do not have a shared confession of faith, because we do not have a creed, right, that this is a thing that all the congregations agree to. So it takes on some of those roles, right? And that, it makes it interesting. I will say it made our work real interesting at certain points to think through some of these questions. So just laying that out there to clarify, because that really, I think shaped our understanding of our work, right, in terms of how we address some of these things, or took those into account. So Cheryl, if you want to go ahead and start talking about why we took the values approach.
We took the values approach for a few reasons. One, we talk about our shared values all of the time. I don't know how many times I have preached sermons that say, UU values, UU values, UU values. Well, what are they? Because we don't articulate them anywhere. Sometimes we try to use our principles as those values. As Rob just said, we don't have a shared creed. We don't have a shared confession of faith. But what we have, what every group has, are shared values. We are Unitarian. I am a Unitarian Universalist because of the values of this faith. Not because of some book, not because of, somebody said something and whatever. But even those things articulate our values. So we decided to make this shift and just call them what they are and be clear about them and clear about what our values are. We did not come up with them ourselves. We asked y'all. We asked different groups. We had forums in different spaces. And we asked the question, what are the values we share? And we could have stopped after the first 100. We went on and on and on. Because the good thing, when I first saw it, I was like, everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody's saying the same thing. Isn't anybody saying anything new? And I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. We're saying the same things. Maybe we're not using quite the same words, but we are all saying the same things. We do know what our values are. So if we know what they are, why don't we just say what they are? The challenge for us was to take all of these different words, put them into different categories, because you may have 5 words that mean the same thing. and then come up with single words that articulate the values we share as Unitarian Universalists, and that these values would serve as a touchstone to our faith and be the basis of the covenant we as congregations share.
Thank you, Cheryl, for that. And so we talk so much about being a covenantal community, a covenantal religion, because we have so many different beliefs or theologies ourselves. What is it that holds us together? We're held together through covenant. And that's an extremely important piece. And so, like values, our covenant is emphasized throughout. I've often talked about our principles as our covenant between ourselves and with the world. We're saying to people, this is who we are, this is what we value. And so in the covenant piece, we're saying, because we value this, then we covenant to do so and so, so that our values are not just lofty ideas, but they get grounded in the real world through our actions and how we are with each other and how we are in the world. So the covenant is an agreement between the congregations. Article 2 covenant is an agreement between congregations. And we wanted a covenant based on our values, and that says why we are pledging these actions with each other. One of the things that we have heard a lot is that our existing principles don't really have verbs in them, right? And so the covenant calls us not just into being, but into doing. They guide our actions. And so we have included verbs in our covenant with each other.
All right, I'm going to talk about our inspirations really quick, but first I completely forgot to introduce myself earlier. So I'm Fatia Mamdani. I started on the commission as a youth member, but now I'm a young adult and I'm a freshman in college. Back to inspirations. So currently, in our current Article 2, we have a list of inspirations, and we talked a lot about how a list can never be complete. A list always has something where you're adding something more, you want to take away an aspect of the list. It's something that can never be fully complete. So we created a statement that articulates what our inspirations are and what they should do. A really important part of this statement to us was that we felt like a better use for the bylaws was to create a statement where we articulated what our inspirations do and how to tie them to our values. Kind of as Cheryl and Paula were both talking about a little bit with our values approach, we wanted our sources of inspiration statement to be really clear and connected to our values as well.
I too forgot to introduce myself. So I am Maya Waller. I am the other youth to young adult member, and I am currently a sophomore in college. And so I am going to talk a little bit about the last two pieces of Article 2 that we had to consider in our revision. The first of which is the inclusion section, which in our review we found was the most recently adopted section of Article 2 and is largely in line with our current thinking and expression of what the future of our faith needs. So there wasn't as much revision to that as the other sections. And then the freedom of belief section, which was found to have a lot of legalistic language and convoluted wording, which was very confusing for myself included. And so our revision is stated more simply and directly. And while it does maintain our strong commitment to congregational polity and individual right of consciousness, right? Yeah, conscious. And so that those are the final two pieces in our revision. And now I'll pass it to Rob to start sharing our revision to Article 2.
Thanks, Maya. One of the things we found in this process, especially during the feedback sessions where we would present sections of draft language, but also in our work, right, when we were working on it and revising it and changing sections, is to read it and read it again and read it again, right, to really sit with this and to read it out loud. When I teach writing, I often encourage my students to read their writing out loud. You will hear things you don't see on the page. You inhabit in a different space, and some people just process better hearing it rather than seeing it. And so we thought, just to make sure everybody has kind of heard it, really kind of thought through it, and I know the board's going to have some time to ask us some questions afterwards. So we wanted to center down in this for a moment and just have you all listen to it. I'm not sure, I'll be completely honest, that we sort of ascended to the heights of poetry, which was part of our charge, but it's definitely a little more poetic. It does, I remember looking back at some notes from an earlier session as I was prepping for this, and I had to think about how some wording didn't sing and some wording sang to me, right? And so your mileage will vary, but let's start with the purposes. The Unitarian Universalist Association will devote its resources to and use its organizational powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. Its primary purposes are to assist congregations in their vital ministries, support and train leaders, both lay and professional, to foster lifelong faith formation, to heal historic injustices, and to advance our Unitarian Universalist values in the world. The purpose of the Unitarian Universalist Association is to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love.
Section C 2.2. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared value. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are justice, pluralism, interdependence, transformation, generosity, equity. On the screen now, you see a diagram, and it is an image of a chalice with an overlay of the word love over the flame, with 6 outstretched arms that create a circle around each of the core values and form a 6-petal flower shape. Each arm is a different color, and they are interdependence, orange, equity, red, transformation, purple, pluralism, dark blue, generosity, teal, and justice, yellow.
Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish Earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect.
Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect.
Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities.
Section C23, Inspirations. As Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us live into our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Grateful for the religious ancestries we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom.
Section C24, Inclusion. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to being an association of congregations that empowers and enhances everyone's participation, especially those with historically marginalized identities.
Section C2.5, Freedom of Belief. Congregational freedom and the individual's right to conscience are central to our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Congregations may establish statements of purpose, covenants, and bonds of union, so long as they do not require that members adhere to a particular creed.
That's it. That is the revised Article 2. If you read our first draft, you may notice some very big revisions and some small ones. We had a lot of feedback and we listened to that feedback. And we incorporated a lot of the changes. Evolution became transformation, is one example. We think this work, as great a departure from the current Article 2, is also a departure that signifies that we are going in a different, we are building upon what, it's not a different direction. We are building upon what we have done. and we are preparing ourselves for the future. Is everyone happy with everything we wrote? No, we're not. None of us are, even on the commission. You really you should have been in the room where it happened. But we were not. We knew we could never be perfect. We could never have the language that absolutely everybody everywhere agreed with, unless we ultimately said nothing. Because we have people who do not agree with our 7 principles as they are written too. So we have never had this full agreement, nor do we want to. And we recognize the fact that this is a change. This is not a small change. We have now gone from 1961's purpose and objectives to the 80s purposes and principles to purpose, values, and covenant. It is part of that transformation of our living tradition. We are not etching this in stone. We are writing it in pencil. And 20 years from now, there will be another group that will look at these and come up with yet a new way of thinking. If I'm alive, inshallah, I will be so thrilled to see that happen, because it means that we are embracing the future and not tied to the lifeless creeds.